Greg Troutwine with Maritime Reporter TV, and we're here again with Jim Bunsey, the Director of Commercial Business Development for PERC, to discuss how propane is growing in popularity as an alternative fuel to diesel in the maritime and the port sector. So, Jim, it's good to speak with you again, and I know we've had these conversations previously, but if we can just start, if you could remind our viewers, what is the overall value proposition that propane has the potential to deliver as an alternative fuel in the maritime and port space?
So Greg, we kind of look at propane, it's a hydrogen-rich fuel. So the chemical formula of propane is C3H8. So it's hydrogen-rich. So we have a little bit of carbon in it, but it's hydrogen-rich. It's abundant. It's affordable. In the United States right now, we produce 30 billion gallons, and we're just using underneath 10 billion gallons. So we have a lot of it available. We've done port tractor studies where, 99% cleaner than diesel when we look at particulate matter. So simple things are there's equipment that's starting to become available in ports in the material handling parts of the ports where, it's an easy thing to change. If you have new equipment, you're going to buy that today, bring that in, you're going to clean up when you compare to diesel. And then, with the hopes of renewable energies coming in the future, which, it's growing, as we spoke before, that it gives you a clear path to zero. So right now we're cleaner than the electric grid, but coming up, as we start taking recyclable plastics and we take plant material and we develop propane or derive propane out of, bad products, we start seeing carbon intensities that can be -0. So equipment that the ports buy today gives them a clear path to zero carbon emissions in the future.
Okay, well, Jim, I appreciate that insight, and also it's a perfect segue into my next question because can you give us insight on the prevalence of propane today across the supply chain, with insight specifically on where producers are in the quest to deliver that green propane produced from renewable sources?
So right now, our domestic propane, every major city in the world has it. I was out in Anaheim, California, and we were charging electric vehicles with renewable propane, and they had 90,000 gallons of storage 2 blocks away from the event that we were at. So propane is used widely across the United States. We're usually to the point where natural gas doesn't reach, because there are partners. A lot of propane is developed by processing natural gas. So where natural gas doesn't reach, propane, we can bring a secure energy source to the area where it's needed. It also gives us grid, stability where we can go completely off grid. So as microgrids and power generation starts to become on site, such as ports themselves, we can be cleaner than the electric grid in most states. And it's easy for us to do, but it's grid resilience. So if something happens to, electricity's down and we don't have compressor stations up, you can have energy storage on site. There's a data center in New Mexico. We're talking ports, but when we talk large scales, they are building a data center that needs 12 days of storage. They're putting in 6 90,000 gallon tanks. So on-site storage becomes a big thing. With that on-site storage, when we compare it and, not push on diesel too hard, but so some of the benefits of propane is, propane doesn't break down. It can be stored in the tank for 1 year, 2 years, 20 years. There's no oxygen, so it doesn't separate. C3H8, simple chemical formula where we don't have to recondition it. When we use diesel as backups, every 6 months you're supposed to condition it, you start to stir it, and there's come maintenance costs. The propane systems, it's under moderate pressure. So if it's 100 degrees outside, we have 200 PSI in our tanks. So that's why it's affordable infrastructure. But that also in the ports where we have all of this moisture and water around us, we don't have rust inside those tanks because there's no oxygen. So there's no oxidation, corrosion, or fuel degradation happening. So when we look at the ports and look at, material handling, I keep pushing away because we have equipment available, port tractors, forklifts, straddle carriers. You can buy that equipment today, which moves us into, okay, you're cleaner, you clean up the environment, back to, renewable propane. Renewable propane, we shipped 40 million gallons. Not a lot when we compare it to 10 billion, but by the end of, 2025, we should have 120 million gallons. And we're seeing it work. And it's not just going to California, because most of those gallons were going to California for on-road use or where we need to look at it. But that's where, we're starting to push. That's where we're starting to have the carbon regulations come in. But the processes are becoming simple. We're delivering all the way up the East Coast. We're delivering all around the country now, small batches of renewable propane. Key part to that is we're not changing infrastructure. It's the same tanks, it's the same pumps, the same storage and the same equipment running. So we can go with blends from 1% to 100% as needed to meet our carbon intensity. And it's a very wide path with available resources that can help us be good stewards of the earth and clean up the environment.
But can you offer insights on propane use case studies that you think highlight the value of propane that you can deliver?
So, I mean, I'm really looking at the ports and being accepted in, and we've been, we're working on the West Coast with the large ports on the West Coast, and we're starting to be in the East Coast. And, one of the larger ports we're working with right now, they're getting 27 port tractors. It helps them with their sustainability goals. So they're not buying ones and twos. They test it and they realize, oh man, this propane works great. Our fuel systems are simple. The maintenance is down. So I mean, you look at that, you're seeing these ports grow, and our inland ports are coming in. I know you're maritime, but anytime we're material handling, they're switching to it. And we know the ports, they're pushed on. There's a lot of emission, but almost every piece of anything we touch probably passes through one of our ports around the country. And so there's a lot of emissions that affect all of us. And really, propane gives us a really good solution. And many of those ports, they're using forklifts in their inside areas because why do you drive propane forklifts inside the areas? People don't get sick. So we can get rid of all the math and science and emissions coming out of there. It's simple. You can drive that equipment inside a building with people occupied in there and people don't get sick. So it's just it gives us just a clear path for zero carbon in the future.